Welcome back, you guys, to this episode. We are going to be talking about my TikTok of the week, which is going to be the phone calls. I just did a TikTok about this yesterday about phone calls when you're dealing with a high conflict parent. I'm just going to say it. I'm against them. I'm against the bedtime phone calls. I'm against the checking in on your kid 50 times while they're with the other parent. I'm just against it. And I think everybody needs to go watch that TikTok, but I'm going to kind of go over the cliff notes of it here right now. But first, I want to hear from you, Leah, because you said something before we started today that I think more people need to hear. Explain how you don't see your daughter for the whole summer, for the whole winter break, and how often do you call?
No, I don't really call her ever, to be honest.
What?
She texts me.
She does.
FaceTimes, or sometimes she'll say, we'll say, "Oh, do you want to FaceTime?" And if yes, like she's not doing anything, we'll FaceTime. But yeah, she'll be gone 8, 9, 10 weeks. And I don't usually call because for a few reasons. One, I feel like I don't want to impede on their time because I certainly wouldn't want him impeding on ours. But also she's older, so she's 12. And so if she wants to talk to me, she can. She'll call me or text me. I don't feel like I need to be like, well, what are you doing? Can I talk to you? Can I call you before bed? Can I see what you're not? And that's just me. That's how I do it. And we've been divorced for a long time now. We were like, she was about 1.5 when we split it up, and now she's almost 13. So it's been a long time. But I don't usually call.
Right. So you have really taken yourself out of the equation, and you've thought about not only the impact it would have in the reverse order back at your house, because you do have her through the school year, but also how it would affect your ex-husband and your daughter. Like, I don't know what they're doing. So I don't want to be impeding and interrupting a dinner or interrupting an activity. Maybe they're out doing something, and then here I am calling and interrupting. And for high conflict people, you guys have to understand, and this was my story. The sound of my voice on the other end of the phone would trigger my ex-husband. And then as soon as the phone conversation was over, he did the next 45-minute ass chewing to them about how much of a piece of shit I am. The look of my name coming across the phone. And I had my own ringtone on his phone because this is, again, early 2000s. They didn't have their own phones. And so if I called, all it did was like, your bitch mom's calling, get your asses over here, whatever. Let's see what this fucking bitch wants. And now my kids are like, and then he'd say, don't tell her this, ask her this, ask her. There was no point in these phone calls. And I think a lot of you are making the phone calls for a couple of reasons. Number one, you're insecure about letting your kid be at another house without you. And I totally get it, but you have to really think about, this is a you issue. This isn't even a kid issue. And I know some of you have a little bit of cockiness and you're like, but my kid misses me. And that may be true, but I'm going to ask you, what the fuck does the phone call help? What does it help? Because your kid can't smell you, can't touch you. They see you. And for a lot of you, all that's going to happen is your kid is going to miss you more. Your kid's going to see you. I know of my Brutus, who's 4 years old right now when you're listening to this. If I were to FaceTime my kid, I was in the hospital for 3 or 4 days earlier this month. And Jared kept saying, do you want to FaceTime the boys? I'm going to cry. I said, no, I miss them.
It would just make it worse for them.
Yeah. I was going to make it worse for Brutus. Now, Augie probably could have got on the phone and been like, hey, mom, where are you at? Blah, blah, blah. But there's no way I was going to do that to Brutus because, and Jared and I are together and I still didn't want to impact him like that and see me and not be able to have me hold him. Right. So I think a lot of you need to step back and ask yourself, first and foremost, is this phone call about me missing my kid or is it for my kid? And what comfort is the phone call really going to give my child? And again, you guys, I want to preface, this is just for high conflict. If you and your ex get along and you do phone calls all the time, fucking go for it. But even still, I'd ask you, are you interrupting? Like, does your ex, I know he may respect you and get along with you in a non-high conflict situation, but does he really want to see you on the phone all the time? You're interrupting his parenting time. So I make these general rules when I do parenting plans, and I'm just going to share them. Number one, no phone calls at night. The last thing before your kid goes to bed, he doesn't need to be triggered. My Brutus does not need to be triggered at 8 o'clock right before bedtime to see my face and then miss me. Right before he goes to bed, now he's missing his mama? No way. So I'm not doing phone calls at bedtime. I'm doing phone calls before dinner. Before dinner. If it's that fucking important, step away from your job, step away from wherever, and call between 3 and 5. That's it. And we're talking 10 minutes. You don't get a fucking half hour. You're not. And anybody, I saw in the comment section earlier, and we see this a lot in our groups, one parent calls 3 or 4 times No, you get one. You get one. You don't get to interrupt my time 3 or 4 times a night. You get one phone call. You get one text message, little thread over here, and that's it. And you control that by saying, hey, kiddo, look, you're at my house and we're playing right now. It's 3:00. Talk to your mom for a little bit, and then we're going to put your phone over here. And it's going to be right here all night, but we're going to go play. And you're allowed to say the phone is here for an emergency, but we're going to go play. And you don't, no, we're not calling. We're not doing that. So the phone calls need to happen earlier in the daytime. They need to be 1 10-minute call. And it doesn't have to be a FaceTime. For those of you that are like, it has to be. No, it doesn't. If you want to talk to your fucking kids so bad, take whatever you get. If the other party doesn't want you to see their house or see where they're at, then do it. But here's what I would do. Get a fucking tripod, set the fucking phone up, hit record or hit go. And now all my ex is seeing is this boring ass fucking wall behind him. And that's it. Like, you can make it work if you want to, but if you don't want FaceTime calls, old school, pick it up, and just call. The other thing is no phone calls if you've seen the kid that day, or you're going to see the kid that day, or you could have seen the kid the day. Let me explain. You're not calling on days that you dropped off that morning because you've already seen the fucking kid that day. Let me have my night to my fucking self, okay? You already saw the kid the morning. It's okay to go 24 hours or 48 hours without seeing your fucking kid. I used to go 5. I used to go 5 days without seeing my kid. And guess what? I survived it. It sucked, but I survived it. Okay. The other thing is you got to make sure that in these phone calls, you are not going overboard with the whole fucking like, I miss you. I miss you. Oh my gosh, what are you doing? I miss you so much. What are you doing, Mom? Oh, I'm bored. I'm bored without you. I'm doing nothing with. Your kid does not need to be made feel guilty because you can't keep your shit together. Okay. But let me go back. So you're not calling your kid on days that you dropped off or the day that you're going to pick them up later, like maybe after a sporting event. You're not calling after school on those days. And if there was a volleyball game and you didn't go, you're not calling because you did have the opportunity to see your kid. And I know you might have been at your second job, but you know what? Shit happens. But you're not going to call when you've dropped off or you're picking up or you had the opportunity. You're just not. And for those of you that are new in the game and you're freshly divorced and you're telling me that this is bullshit, you should be able to talk to your kid. Give it a minute.
Right.
It's fresh.
See how many years you can.
Because
I think part of that
it's
too
going to
is
hurt you.
Being careful of your own inner dialogue with this. Like, we have people who feel guilty for not, they feel like they have to be talking to their kid every single day, because if they don't, that means they're not being a good mom, or they don't care about their kid, or they're not thinking about their kid or missing their kid. And that's really just not true.
Right.
So some of it is that inner work and really being honest with yourself about why, like, really, what is your intention? Is it for you, or is it for them and what they need and what's best for them? And it is, and it's a journey, you guys. I mean, it's not even like you could just follow rules and then like everything's going to work out fine. I mean, these are kind of like guidelines and what's worked best in certain scenarios. And so it is a journey and you have to figure out what works best, but just be careful that you're not doing it for the wrong reasons, or it's not overboard. That's the hardest part about divorce, you guys, is when you have kids, you don't see them all the time. You don't get to talk to them every day. You miss out on shit. That's why people stay in marriages for years that they don't want to be in, because of the kids. They don't want to share their kids. But when you take that step and you get divorced, that it is a package deal. You are not in a relationship with this person, and then you are also losing time with your kids. But that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. Divorce is sometimes the best thing for everybody, including your kids. It's the healthiest thing for you and your kids, even if it means taking time apart. And so that's when you have to really do that work and get the support so that you can be okay, so that you can cope with missing out on certain shit and not seeing certain pictures and not going to certain events or not being able to talk to them all the time. That's hard. And there's almost a grieving process too sometimes, but that's when you have to get the right support and figure out how you can navigate time away from your kids. What are you doing? How are you planning? How are you being proactive? If you know your kids aren't going to be there and you know you're going to really struggle, what are you going to do before that time comes so that you have something to do, so that you're going to rearrange your house, you're going to purge your closet, you're going to meet up with your girlfriends. You have to do things when your kids are gone to help you navigate those times and not feel really lonely and really
Right.
sad and stressed and just be depressed every time they're away. You have to
Right.
learn to embrace that time and make the most of it.
Right. And so, somebody's saying, my ex texts all the time and says, I have a surprise for you next time I see you. God, mine was the king of doing this too. And there was hardly ever any follow through. It was just a ploy for when my kids were with me, for my kids to be like, oh, we can't wait to see dad. We can't wait. He has a surprise for us, has a surprise for us. And when they get there, it could be like a sucker from the fucking bank. Like it wasn't like,
Manipulation.
it was just a manipulation tactic to interrupt my time, to get them to miss him and all that. And I will tell you guys, it's really hard to always remember that like this is a game to them, and your feelings do get hurt sometimes when your kids are real eager during your parenting time to return that phone call and yeah, I want to call dad and yeah, I want to do that, to the high conflict parent because they feel obligated to. And they're scared if they don't because they get in trouble if they don't. So if my kids, let's just make up an example. If my kids didn't call my ex-husband back within 2.3 seconds, they would literally like hyperventilate and have like, but mom, we have to, no, mom, you don't understand. We have to call him back. And I would be like, oh, that's funny. When I would call, you'd go fucking 2 days without calling me back. But for him, you're like, let's go, let's go, let's go. I got to call him back. Give me the phone. Give me the phone. And it's because the pressure that the high conflict parent puts on your child to, well, I'm worried about you. And when I don't hear from you, I think mom's doing something to you. I'm panicked. And your kid doesn't want the high conflict parent to be mad at you. So like, mom, we have to check in with him so he doesn't get mad at you. And your kids up being your protectors in this and trying to keep good graces with the high conflict parent to save your ass. And it's very hard to watch your kids doing shit to please somebody else so they don't yell at me.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, you're 7. Be fucking 7 for 5 minutes and quit trying to be my fucking protector. But that's what my kids went into. They went into this mode of let's just please him so he doesn't yell at you. Because they saw it, they heard it, they felt it, they knew it. And so they would say, if we were at the same place, we went to a Christmas parade one time and he was like, who do you want to stand by? First off, don't fucking ask your kids that with both parents standing right there. Just stand by each other if it's that big a fucking deal, right? But he would say, who do you want to stand by? And they would always say him. And he'd be like, haha, no, dude, they're picking you. A, they're scared to death to displease you. B, they know if you don't, you're going to give me death stares, if not say something to me. And C, they know that I can handle them saying that. Now, sometimes I would cry in the fetal position when I got home and be like devastated they picked him. But I had to really step back and listen to all the therapy that I have and go, look, they're picking him out of fear, not because they want to, but they're afraid of disappointing him because they know the wrath that will happen if they disappoint.
Right.
And that's a hard one to always remember and not get your feelings hurt.
And that's something too, that's if you're the parent where your kids come home and they have like meltdowns and tantrums and they're like giving you shit and giving you attitude, sometimes that's a really great sign because at the other parent's house, they don't feel comfortable enough to do that. They don't feel like they can be themselves. They don't feel like they can really let loose. They're not comfortable. So then they come home and they got to like get it out of their system, right? Because they feel safe at your house.
Right. And so it's a lot of understanding. And I think when I first started this whole process, I would just get offended. My feelings would be so hurt and I didn't understand it. Partly because I was so blind. I didn't know what high conflict was. I didn't know what narcissism was. Didn't know what gaslighting was. I mean, I didn't know all the fucking lingo yet. I was just like, I'm divorcing a dick. Like, that's all I thought. Somebody that fucking hates my guts. And then when I got educated about it, it was like, oh shit. Okay, this is why he's doing it. And it's so important for you guys as parents to completely wrap your head around all of these theories that we teach, we talk about, we have courses about, we have all the tools we teach in the next chapter, all these things. Because as soon as you pick up on it and figure it out, you're then going to be able to show your kids what boundaries are and self-worth is like. And then you know what happens? The high conflict parent loses control over your kids because they become self-assertive. Mm-hmm. They all of a sudden can go, whoa, boundary here. Whoa, that's not true. Not putting up with that. And all of a sudden your kids will have all the same tools you do. And it's like, it's so fun to watch them just grow and realize, man, I've been treated like shit for 15 years and fuck that, I'm done. And I mean, it's scary. It's scary because we all know what a high conflict parent can say and do, what their capabilities are. But unless you get your shit together and figure out how to deal with this high conflict parent yourself as the ex, as the co-parent with them, your kids are never going to do it. What's going to end up happening, I'm just going to give you a spoiler alert. Your kids end up being fucking people pleasers the rest of their lives. That's what'll happen. That's what happened to one of my kids. One of my kids became a people pleaser because she stayed too long and she got invested and she put all of her feelings up on a fucking lockbox on the shelf in the other house and never opened it and just did whatever everybody said. Oh, what do you want me to do? What do you think? What should I do? Oh, you want me to do that? Okay. And she never put herself first until I put myself first, until I learned boundaries, until I learned to give zero fucks about people's thoughts. And then as soon as I did, she did. She got that box down. She opened it up and she said, got it back. And then it was fuck you to everybody that crossed her. But when your kids become people pleasers just to please a high conflict parent, it is a very hard thing to watch, because what my therapist told me is you got to be careful, because as soon as she graduates and she goes off to college, you're not going to be there to protect her. And now she's a people pleaser. Somebody gets her in a dorm room and is asking for things. She's a people pleaser. Will she have the willpower to say no? Will she know how to say no? Has she ever stood up to anybody? Has she ever said no to some? That scared the fuck out of me. So I'm like, okay, get your shit in order, Sam, because if you don't, she's not going to. I'm the leader. I'm the role model. I'm the one showing her how to deal with people. All of you are. You are all a role model. How you engage with your ex, your kids are watching. And I'm not saying go full bore bitch mode. I'm not saying go, absolutely ape shit and be a dick. But what I'm saying is have boundaries. Learn all the things that Leah Marie just did in the other episode about dealing with a high conflict person. Learn these things. You learn them in the next chapter. You can learn them in group coaching. We have tons of tools for you guys, but you got to learn them so your kids can learn them. Because if not, it's fucking scary. It's scary because your kids have been under a high conflict parent for years, and that shit doesn't go away like that. It takes practice. It takes learning. It takes everything. So for me, I lost a few years at the beginning because I was a kiss ass. 8 years. I kissed his ass. I didn't know what any of this shit was. And my kids watched and they followed suit and they were people pleasers too. Until we all kind of like got re-educated. All three became badasses. And now we all three are very assertive people. But there was a scary time where it was people pleasing, but it all started with these phone calls. Like, okay, call your dad. I know we don't want to upset him. That's what I would say. Well, we don't want him upset. So let's call him people pleasing. Here you go. And we would be in the middle of a craft. But if that motherfucker called, we were like, stop the craft. What's he want? No, dude, we're busy. Like, we'll call you when we call you. But all of you are in fear. And I get it. 8 years. 8 years in fear. I totally understand. Totally understand. So it's a big deal. This is really hard. But I want you to kind of evaluate the phone calls, maybe shift the time, make a couple new rules about it. And here's what I was. I was just the one that didn't call. He still called. I didn't. Because I knew if I called, I was triggering him and my kids would hear about it. So I've done 2 or 3 different TikToks about this. They're all pinned, I think, because that's how important I feel about these phone calls. The phone call is about you wanting to talk to your kid, but then your kid pays the price for the phone call. So really think about whether that's worth it or not. Okay. So we threw a lot at you in this episode. I know it's a little overwhelming for those of you that are new, but again, if this is something that resonated with you, go back and watch it again, give it a follow, leave us some comments wherever you're watching this episode at, share it with a friend that absolutely needs it. Cause I know somebody else probably needs it that wasn't in here, tag people that were in it. But you guys, Leah Marie has a confidence course. I have a high conflict course. We have the next chapter where we give weekly trainings on stuff like this. So get in there and take advantage, because the stuff that we have planned for 2024, I'm just going to tell you at the beginning of 2024, there's a NARC training. If you're dealing with a narcissist, I'm giving probably a 2-part training that is going to blow your fucking mind. So that's at the beginning of 2024. So get in there now, because at the end of the year, we're going to erase a lot of those episodes that are already in there, and you won't have access to those trainings and those episodes. So get in there now, watch the past few months so that you go into 2024 already with a game plan, already with information. Okay. So it's at this website that Leah Marie has up on the screen. For those of you listening, it's samandleah.com, SAMANDLEAH. Okay.
And Gina's asking, where can I find the info for the cord prep? That's in the next chapter. We did this past Monday. We did a whole training on cord prep. It was so good. Sam did such a great job. But all those replays, so we do the training live every Monday inside the private Facebook group. And then those replays stay in there for at least 30 days. we really should take them out after 30 days, and then like we don't. So if you get in there, you get a lot of trainings, but the replay of that court prep is still in there, and it'll be in there for at least a month. So if you get into the next chapter, you can watch that.
Absolutely. So until next time, guys, watch all the other episodes, get into the next chapter, and have a good rest of your week. Bye, everybody.